All right, final machine. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Hilchos Naziros Prakim Tes and Yud, concluding with the 10th chapter, the laws of Nazirus, and today's third chapter, Hilchos Arachim V'Charam and Perek Aleph. We're beginning today with Hilchos Naziros Perek Tes. Perek Tes establishes the rule Moisar Nazirim L'Nazirim, as we'll explain, and more importantly, and there'll be many halachas regarding the following. There's a big difference whether a nazir designated specific money for the three karbanos, as we'll learn, what were to happen then if there's going to be a surplus with any of those monies. The key will always be revolving around the fact that a chatos can only be brought when you're obligated to bring a chatos, an animal chatos. So moisar chatos, if there's leftover money, basically there's nothing you can do with it, versus leftover monies for the oila, for the shlamim. Even if you're not obligated to bring them, you can always bring them as a nadava, so they'll have another set of rules. Versus if someone designates what we call ma'os sesumin, money without any designation, then if you have now access to that money, there are a completely different set of rules of what we were to do with them. And finally, we're going to learn that if you have a doubt whether a nazir is tamei or not, you cannot make the teglachas, which is not ma'akev, as we will learn in this chapter. Perek Tes has 19 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. So we learned in the previous chapter the law of a nazir who did not become tamei, how at the end of the counting, after he finished the days, and ideally, if he's a nazir, let's say for 30 days, a nazir stam, which is for 30 days, you should bring the karbanos on day 31, that a nazir has to bring 3 sacrifices, a chatos animal, an oila animal, and a shlamim animal. After the karbanos are brought, the nazir will shave the hair of his head. Actually, he's going to shave all of the hair of his head, which will include the payas. Normally, a man is not allowed to shave the sideburns, but here the mitzvah of shaving the hair will trump the normal prohibition of cutting your payas, and with all the details that we learned yesterday. But we're going to focus now on the karbanos. Hamafresh ma'ois sheyakriv mehen karbanos nazirim. What we are referring about over here is a person who decided to help poor nazirim. You see, unlike other karbanos, sometimes the Torah says, if you're wealthy, bring an animal carbon. If you're poor, bring a bird carbon, which is substantially more inexpensive. It's cheaper, it's more affordable. By a nazir who's tahard, there is no such a difference. All nazirim, when they conclude the days of nazirus, they have to bring 3 animal sacrifices. So it was a normal thing that a person were to make a declaration that I am designating money for a poor nazir. So when he or she finishes their term of nazirus, this money should be used for them to buy the animals. So he made a designation without specifying what pile of the money should go for the chatos, for the oil, for the shlamim. Stam, this is for nazirim. And the hikriv mehen, and a poor person tapped into this fund, but it turned out that this guy donated, let's say, $5,000, and you managed to buy all 3 animals for only $4,000. So now there's extra money. So the din is, yavi b'maisarin karbanis nazirim acherim. That money should be left in this type of fund, left for other poor nazirim who would need financial help to buy their karbanos, because of the cloud, because of the rule that moisar nazirim, that any surplus funds that was designated for nazirim must remain for the same purpose. And what we don't say is, listen, the donor's intent came to fruition, the money was used, maybe the leftover money should be used for another sacrificial purpose. We don't say that. Now, case number 2 in halacha aleph. Hifrish ma'ois sesumin l'naziru soim. Here we're speaking about a person who himself made a vow of nazirus, and not wanting to leave the financial burden for the last second, the person at some point designated money, again, did not specify what money should go for which sacrifice, but it was one bundle of money. It was one bank account that had in it a total number, and that was designated for karbanos of a nazir. And here again, this person who designated it for himself used it, but there's a surplus. Here the law is yiplu hamisadal in the davam. Very important rule. Don't forget, guys, I'm a nazir once. I didn't donate it for poor people out there. It was for me. I used it for me. So you can't say leave the surplus for my next vow of Nazirus. I'm not obligated to make a new vow of Nazirus. Who says I'll ever make it? And even if I do, that money was not for that. So there's something that's called Kayitz HaMizbeach, which literally means the figs of the altar, really meaning dessert for the altar, which means we would prefer that the Mizbeach, during the time that karbanes are brought, which is not only during the daytime of the day, but in between the morning tamid and the afternoon tamid, it should constantly be in use. Right? We take pride over here that the shul is almost always being used. That's a good thing. Now, not every time, not every moment do you have a carbon being brought. So there was a special fund that's called Kayitz Mizbeach, and that is that money was brought to buy karbanos of the category of an oilah, and whenever the altar is sitting idle, that oilah is brought. All of the money is designated for that. Now that's a chiddush. Why is that a chiddush? Because if you were to view the money as part chatos, as part shlamim, you can't change its designation. Nor was then, since the person who designated the money did it stam means they did not specify, even though it was for the karbanos of Nazirus, which includes in it chatos and shlamim, doesn't matter. You used it. Now all of the remaining money can be used for an oil. Now we're going to start building on it. Halacha 2. Here it's different. Here, when you designated money, you said, this is for my chatos, for my oil, for my shlamim. You specified. It doesn't mean that you make 3 piles of coins. It didn't have to be that way. You can have one bank account. You can have $100 bill. But when you made that designation, when you said this money, you didn't say it's for my karbanis nazirus. You verbalized for my chatos, for my oil, for my shlamim. The surplus money that you designated for the oil here, if you can make 3 piles. If there's extra money for the oil, then you have to use it to bring another oil. If you have surplus from a chatos, that's the key. Chatos can only be brought if you're obligated. So the rule of Meiser Chatos is the money has to be completely destroyed. In other words, it's asur b'hana'ah. You cannot do any. Bird chatas can only be brought for a suffix. There's no suffix. You're not chayit. Since oil and shlamim could be brought also as a donation, so it should be used for such. Now, when you bring such a shlamim, guys, normally a shlamim would come with other accessories. You won't bring the breads. Why would you think you bring bread? We'll see actually that the shlamim of a nazir comes with bread. This money will not be brought with bread. In other words, it's not, you don't have to bring a shalmei nazir. On the other hand, it's bound by one rule of the shalmei nazir. Normally, shlamim karbanis could be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. The shlamim of a nazir can only be eaten for 1 day and 1 night, very much like a carbon toido. So the din over here would be then a chalam lo yechad. So it does bind this donation carbon. Interestingly, that it can only be eaten. That chumrah, it's imbued with that chumrah. Now we're going to build on everything that we learned. And the donor passed away. So if the money again was unspecified sasumin, then you pull in a davam. We're going to come back to halacha gimel in a moment. If you specified what money should go, what part of the money should go for what carbon, so then again, the may oila, the may chatos yelchuli yamamelach, the may shlamim yivoyu shlamim. And here again, even though you don't bring the breads, because it's not a shlamim of a chiyuv of a nazir, but if you do bind it with that smaller time limit, then ne'echalim liyayim echad. Even though ve'ena to unam lech. Halacha dalet, more details of when do you consider the money sesumin, right? And from that we'll understand when you consider the money mifodash. That's all you said. This is for my sacrifices. You didn't go into greater detail. and you didn't say anything other than that. But if you said Elu Lechayvasi, wow, even if you didn't say Lechatasi Le'ilasi, right, Lishalmi, but you said Lechayvasi, that's as if you verbalized Chatas Oil and Shlamim. No need to say if you mamish said Elu Le'ilasi Lechatasi Le'ishlamai, Shein Kemifaydoshim. Halacha, in other words, what we see in Dalid is that even though before we learned about the Moisar Oilah, you can have one pile. But if you said the words Lechayvasi or more, then it's Mifaydoshim. Now, Hamafrish Behemas Balamu. If you designated an animal that has a blemish, Harei Hi Kama Oisasumen, which means that let's say the person passes away. You take that, you sell the animal, and the money goes l'kates on this bear. If you designated one block of silver gold or one utensil, there, since you designated not money, but the value of money, and you only designated one item, even if you said it's like mo'is. Wow. In other words, if you designated money, mamish, and you make such a statement, that's called mefaydashim. But since you designated one chunk, one block, it combines everything together. And by the way, the same thing is with a behemoth balamum. If I designated shuki 3 animals balas mum, 3, then it's kemefaydashim. Since what you was designated has to be sold and it's one item, it makes it considered unspecified. Halacha vav. He only specified the chatos karban and the person, let's say, passed away, or another case, right? And the heifer labayla. Now, just to know the rule that if a woman, right, is a nazira and she designated animals, and the husband goes ahead now and he's meifed her neder, it has the same status exactly as someone who designated karbanis and they passed away. Point is because they're not there to bring it.
It says here, I said
That's exactly what I said. So then the may chatos, so the value for the chatos yelchuli yamamel, and bahashar yavi bechetzin oilo bechetzin shlamim. In other words, if you were mafresh the chatos part, or if this woman, right, designated the animals, then the chatos remains a chatos. Halach of zayin.
Husband can't be made for that part.
No. Why? Because hafara is only mikanu lahaba. If it would have been retroactive, it would have been hegdish b'to'us. But we don't view it that way. Halach of zayin. Amar elu lo'ilasi. The only specification is for the oila. And the hashar l'nazirusi. So the may oila yovayo oila. Now the beauty here is that the rest is stumen. So the din of stumen is v'ashar yiplu in a davam. It's unspecified. In other words, whenever the chatas money is mixed in the rest, it has a din of stumen, and then you don't lose that money. Halachay mi shedima shuchay b'naziris. If a person thinks they're chay b'naziris, and they designated the animals, and then shal l'chacham, they went over to a scholar, and the Rav paskin she'ein zaneder. No, you were never chayiv, and therefore ben chay b'naziris. So now, ma yasu b'karbani shefish, even if this person designated my friends 3 animals, nothing, yetzu v'yeru b'edi, you can put them right back into your urn. There is no even remnant of kedusha. Why? Because that's called hegdish tos, which is eina hegdish, as we learn. Kameish yizbar b'mekaymayim. Halacha 9, halacha tes. Ha'isha shenadra b'nazir, v'hi frisha karbonei sehal. And like we mentioned, that after she designated for karbanis heifer labayla. Okay. So now what says that Rambam like this? Im mishaloi hoisa habehema, which means this detail. He owned animals, and he told his wife that these animals is for your needs of nazirus. In other words, he gave it to her if she needs it. Turns out now she doesn't need it. So therefore, even though we said before, right? If she knows that Rambam is going to greater details, there's a big difference whether she out of pocketed the money or whether he gave her the animals for her nazirus. In the latter case, it's also like a toes. The animals belong to him. He did not give her a gift. He gave it to her for her need. Turns out she has no such need, which means the husband never gave it to her. How is it halachically possible? Someone gave her such a gift. Or even the husband told his wife, this is yours. So now we got a problem. And what happens? It's hachatos tamus. Again, I know it's like any time if a person designates a chatos, just to give you an example, and the donor passes away. Ein kapara la'achamisa. You'll see that's, there's 5 chatois hamesos with details. You don't kill the animal, you leave it to die, but the animal has to be has to be left to die. And v'ha'oila tikrav oila, v'hashlamim yikravu shlamim. And here again, even though mitzad echad, it's not a shalmi nazir. You don't have to bring the 20 loaf of breads, but then a chalam liyem echad. They are limited like the shalmi nazir. They're not like an average shlamim that could be eaten out there for 2 days and 1 night. The einam, but the einam to unam lechem. All right. In other words, halacha tes is adding detail to one of the scenarios in halacha vav. Okay, right. Halacha yud. Hifresh mois sumen. The man, the husband, designated monies that were unspecified, and he said, so the same halacha we learned in the beginning of halacha aleph, right? When there's surplus money or when there's a passing, here also happens over here. Just like by a man. Very good. Halacha Yudav. She makes a vow. All of the dinim that we learned over Shabbos, the complex dinim, will apply man and woman equal. The whole parsha is given for men and women. And the nitmas, she became impure. Now comes the catch. Now the husband heard that what? That she made a vow, not that she became tamei. Because don't forget, we learned this in the previous series, that the power that God gave the husband to be mefer the nazirus of his wife, and you know why he's able to do it? Because it's inui nefesh, because part of the nazirus is not to have wine. So on the day that he heard it, he was mefer. Now, hanei mevia karban tuma. Why do we say that? Nachamo. Again, I know the words that we learned in the Rambam appeared one time to be otherwise. It's oiker. Me'ikari, but we already learned one shot in that. Because hafaras habal is not lemafreya. It's only mikano lahab. She was a nazir. She became tummy. The Torah says you're a nazir or a nazir. You become tummy. You're chayiv at the end of when you went on the 7th day. You got to take care of karbanis. Just because he was made for the netted, it doesn't take away the past. So the chiyuv remains. No, halacha yud.
The karban of the nazir only kicks in at the end.
Very good. Even though she won't have to bring the korbanis at the end of her nazirus because there is no end of her nazirus, but before the husband was made for, she became tamei. That's machayiv to bring korbanis. That chiyuv remains. And guys, we have this in Peirik Beis, an interesting concept. Not only did we learn over there the idea of oinas hanadorim and muflas samach leish, which is like wow. But for that, you're considered a bar mitzvah for this, for nadarim. You're in the age, you're mature enough for nadarim. We learned also that a father can impose nazirus on a minor son. And now who's chayv to bring the korbanis at the end? The fathers. The hifrish Allah of korbanosov. We also learned in Peirik Beis that there are scenarios where the son can get out of that obligation. So now we have to continue with the same theme of this chapter. What do you do with the korbanis? We also learned that other relatives can protest. You, dad, what are you doing? You're too harsh. Or this child, he or the relatives did an act which expresses, we reject you, dad, imposing nazirus, which is shegilahu as we learned in Peirik Beis, that nullifies the nazirus. But here you designated the karbanos. So like this, if you actually designated 3 separate animals, the laws will be consistent. The chatos tamus and the oila tikrav oila, the hashlamim should be brought as a shlamim, but it's going to be bound with this chumrah that it can only be eaten for 1 day. Of course, 1 day and 1 night, but the point is not 2 days and 1 night. However, and if hitfish leimois is woman, that's the topic of this chapter. So then gavaldik, all of it will be used. Yitrul and a dava, it's going to be a donative. It's going to be left as a donation for the kupa and the Beis Hamikdash. That whenever the mizbech is idle, don't allow it to be idle. Yitrul and a dava. People got to learn in this Beis Medrash 24/7. That's the message of all this. Like you have to chaparai. It's something holy, you got to use it the whole time. Here again, the may chatas yachal yamelch, the may oilo yavay oilo, the may shlamim yavay shlamim. The enam tunum lechem and achalum liyamecha. Talacha yud gimol hoiber hadeni nazir. Kishiyeli bein and v'hifrish carbon. When was he mafresh a carbon? This is important, guys. You'll chap soon. It must be from when his wife got pregnant, which is why we say that when he designated the carbon, he had in mind for that, and God forbid v'hipila ishta, even if a chazra v'yolda, we say harezu hakorban is suffix. Why do we say it's a suffix? Because if he designated the korbanos for when she will have a child, well, then these korbanos are going to be consecrated from whenever. And if this one, was not successful, for the next one. But maybe he designated the korbanos not prior to being Meuberes. She was already Meuberes. So if he linked it to that ibur, then it could be like a chata shemesu ba'alel. And what do we say? In other words, on one hand, it might be holy to the point that as the law is that these korbanos may not be dealt with without respect. Mitzat sheni, you can actually offer them, and the rule therefore would be that the chatos, suffix chatos behema, right? The animal has to be left to die. If we're speaking about actual korbanos, and the same rules, oil and shlamim, you bring it and you make that. If there's you bring them as an adav. Halacha yudal. Shnei nazirim, shenitma echad mehem, and ve'eno yadua mihu. How can that be? We'll see in a moment. And there's a lot of nuance in how can that be. But many times we don't even deal with that, how it happened. That's what happened. You have 2 chevra, yeah. One of them is tummy. Ketzad medium carbon, I say, and now let me just go by heart to explain what's going on over here. Don't forget, just to make a quick kitzur. A nazir that's tummy, that's the key. A nazir that's tummy brings 2 birds. This is whether they're wealthy or poor. Echad lachatos ve'echad la'oila, and a kevesh la'asham. That's what we learned yesterday. A nazir that's tahar, wealthy or poor, brings 3 animals: keves la'oila, a kasba lachatos, and a ayah l'shlam. A nazir that's tamei not only has to bring the karbanis of a nazir that's tamei, but as we learned, then they start counting again, and then at the end they have to bring karbanis of a nazir that's tahar. So you have 2 people. How many sets of karbanis will come from these 2 people? So the Rambam is going to speak here, unlike in next chapter where things get a lot more fun, a lot more complicated. Here, the Rambam writes what you do. You understand the problem? Who's tummy? Who's chayiv to bring it? Since you know one is chayiv, so they participate in the carbon tuma, and they together participate in the carbon tahara. When do they do that? Here, means after. See, they both misafek, they both have a doubt then. So they're both going to have to undergo the 7 clean days with the hazah. And then they're going to wait until the end of the days of the Nazirus. Why? Because the one that's tahar didn't have his prior days knocked off and may not do any steps until when the days ended. So first get out of your tumah. Wait until the Meloisim Nazirus. So we also learned that even though the nazir that's tamei could bring the karbanis on the 8th day, but if they didn't bring it on the 8th day, they bring it whenever they bring it, and then they begin counting again the days. So we say that's what they'll do. And they say, if I'm the tamei, even though I kratzt, because let's say Nazirus was for 30 days, one of them got tamei in day 15. So even though on day 21, they went through the 7 days, no one is doing anything before day 31. Or even b'diavad on day 30. But now, either you're bringing it as a tamei or you're bringing it as a tar. Now, the beauty here is that you have two nazirim. So you bring the two birds and the keves la'asham. You have those karbanis for the nazirus betuma. You have the three animals for the nazirus betar, and each one says, if I'm the tamei, then the carbon of the tuma is for me. They're mamish different animals. You have to understand, guys, mamish, none of them are alike. There is no overlap. Because the karbanis of a nazir, the chatos and the oila are birds. The animal is a kevesh. The kevesh of the nazir, just to know, is la'oila, a nazir tar. The kevesh of the nazir tam is la'ashan. Different animals, which is good. And the carbon tara shalcha. And the imani watar. So then the carbon tara shali, the carbon tuma shalach. Now another detail that the Rambam doesn't have to say, but he expects us to know, neither of them can behave as a non-nazir. No one can drink wine until the end of the naziros because each one has a doubt. But that's simple. He's just going through the karbanis. And now the soifrim yemei naziros acheres gemura. After the karbanis are brought, you begin a new count. Who does the new count? Both, because each one maybe was the one that was tamei. Then you bring, guys, only one set, because really the one that was not tamei is out. Now, who pays for it? Mistama, they make up, they both pay for it together. The Chayzer Meviyam carbon tara, and they have, which meant that 30 days ago the carbon tuma was mine, which meant that 30 days ago the carbon tara then was yours, which means I'm the one, I'm the one that's been carbon tara. If I was always tar, which meant the carbon of tara that was brought 30 days ago was already mine. I'm already good. The carbon tuma was yours, and therefore this is your carbon. The point here is nimtzu shalayev sidu b'carbon the same klum, which is great. That's the best case scenario when even though there's a doubt, you're not getting tripped up. Halacha tezvav meis echad mehem. Now, if one of them dies, now we got a challenge. Maybe chatas or oif. The oilas behemam. See, the beauty is that chatas or oif could come on a safek. One of them is tamei, one of them is chayv to bring. The beauty is that the karbanis nazir tamei can be brought out a safek. And v'yoyim im tamei yisi halkap what's going over here. Then hachatos is mechayvasi, the bird, which is the way it has to be. If I'm the one that's tamei, the oil is in a dava. Why is that? Because he's bringing a animal oil. You understand? An animal oil is only brought by a nazir that's tahor. So if he's saying, if I'm tamei, how are you explaining the animal? It's an adava. Another detail, guys. What about the asham? We learned yesterday over Shabbos, Shuki, that both the chatos, both the asham and the oila of a nazir tamei is not ma'akev. In other words, what is essential? Only the chatos. So good. And the bird chatas you can bring alasafik. The animal asham you cannot bring alasafik, but you're not going to bring it, and it's not going to be ma'akev anything. And if I'm tired, then the oila is mechayvasi, and the chatas or if is called the safik, meaning that I can bring it. Now it's a regular safik. And the beauty is a bird chatas is the only exception that could be brought al safik. Unlike an animal chatas, that's where you get tripped up. Then you're stuck. And then he counts the day of the nazirus.
Is it any different than this case is meis echad?
Yeah, before, in other words, two people on nazir, and one became tamei, and prior to them bringing the karbanis of tuma, for one of them died. The one who died is not mechayiv to bring. Maybe the one who died, that was the one that was tamei. Still, you're not trapped. Because you can bring the chatas, the bird chatas, which is the essential one for the nazir tamei, and you're saying, if I'm the tamei, then this is it. If I'm tired, I don't know if I'm tired. If I'm tired, then I'm bringing a chatas misafik. And then you count the days, and then you bring the karbanis tara. And what do you say? Im tamei yisi, which is great. With ha'oila harishayna that I brought then, he brought an animal. He said that was already in the dava. At the end of this count, he's going to bring the three animals, and he's going to say v'su chayva. If I was tired then, now guys, here's the beauty. If he was tired then, that means he didn't bring the chatos yet. Because the bird was, if he started, there's no bird chatos for nazir tar. But he's bringing now 3 karbanis, oila, shlamim, and chatas, which is great. Now, you don't have to bring them all together. It comes out that the animal oila was not nedava. That was one of the first 3 for my tahara. Perfect. Now I'm bringing the chatas. Now I'm bringing the shlamim. So oila rishona was the chayva. So I really, he doesn't have to bring a new oila now. He already brought it 30 days ago. And v'zunadava v'zeu shar karbani. All he needs to say is that this oil is an adava, and then the chatos and the shlamim is perfect. Now we're going back to the case where they both lived, like we mentioned. Even though the Rambam addressed the karbanos, but the ein echad mishnei megalech teglachas tuma. It was very important, and that's something that we learned over Shabbos. You see, guys, my friends, the taglachas of a nazir is not ma'akev, and therefore we asked the question: a man is not allowed to shave his payas. Some people never trim it, but you can't shave it. A nazir, the mitzvah of the nazir, the asay, is doicha de loisase. That you know that you're chayiv. So he's saying that if, in the case of a doubt, no one is going to make a taglachas tuma, elim keino iktanim or nashim that are not bound by the laws of payas, because she'ein elam akifim pa'asaroish misafik. And the beauty is, since taglachas tuma is not ma'akev, so therefore now, what happens at the end of the next set? There you shave your hair, because everyone is chayiv to shave, even if it's an adult. Okay. Halacha tazayim. How can that be? Now, sometimes you should know that halacha doesn't have to address how can that be. It can be, but here the Rambam is telling you how can there be a doubt? And there's a nuance here. Kate said, you have 2 Nazirim, they are standing in a private domain. One of the guys, remember this klal. Chazering the klal, if you know it, that the way we define Reshus HaYachid, Reshus HaRabim, let's say for Hilchas Shabbos, is completely unrelated to the way we define it when it comes to the rule, Safek Tumah B'Reshus HaRabim, Midoiraisa, we're Mekel, Tahar, Safek Tumah B'Reshus HaYachid, Tamei. Safek Tumah B'Reshus HaYachid, Tamei is because by a soita, there were 2 people, we don't know what they did, and we have to behave as if they had a relation until she drinks the Mechatas. How many people were together? The woman and that man. So the way you define Reshus HaYachid for the klal of Tuma, Safek Tuma, Reshus HaYachid, Sfekai Tamei, is if there were only 2 people together. If you have 3 people together in a real private domain, it's called Rabin. So what happened? You had these 2 Nazirim, they were in a Reshus HaYachid, and Shesafek Tuma Sham Tamei. That's the din. Whenever there's a doubt, it's Tamei, but that's because the third party is not there. Now, who witnessed what happened? The witness has to be outside of that domain, because the moment the observer is with them, you got 3 people. So that's the point. One of them was outside, and he saw both of them, and he says, guys, I saw that one of you touched the source of Tumah. I know that happened. I just don't know which one. That's a case where both of them are Tamei from a doubt. But if their witness was with them, because Kivan Shem Shloisha, for these rules, they are like Rabim, and the rule is that Rabim Reshus HaYachid Sfeikon Tar. Kesafek Tumah Reshus HaRabim Shutar, as we will learn, and all of that is because the whole thing that Safek is, like we said, Safek Reshus HaYachid is learned from a Soita. So if it's dissimilar to the Soita, it's considered for this like a Reshus HaRabim. Now, Halacha Yud Zayin, that what? That both of them will bring a carbon tumah, even though there was only one aid. That's because they were quiet, or they themselves had a doubt. What happens if they contradicted? If one of them tells this witness, I can tell you one thing: I did not become tummy. Then I'm gonna add something a big chiddush. Even if you were to have 2 witnesses that are saying you touched tumah, and the nazir says, no, I did not. He'll have nemanus. Because when the person is saying, I'm not tamei, halachically, it's as if he said, I'm not chayiv to bring korbanis tumah, because nazirus could be retroactively revoked through she'elah. That's one step. There are 2 parts to this. And the moment he has a doubt, then it may be korban. Furthermore, not only about Tuma, I saw you making such a vow. If the person says, no, I did not, if the guy says, no, more, even if two people say, I just don't know which one. Each one, if you don't contradict them, there's only one witness, so you would argue it's not considered the real Nazirus. No, it is. And this guy drank wine, or he became Tomei, if he's going to be Chai Malkas Midoiraisa, even though Sheikar and Nazirus Be'ed Echad. And that's consistent with many other halachas in the Torah. You have these rules, right? That Eid Echad Neman Bisurin. But for money, you have to have two Eid. Yeah, very nice. If one Eid establishes a woman is married, Eid Echad Neman Bisurin. But then she does a sin for which she loses her ksuba. She'll lose her ksuba. We don't say, it only came from one. Once we are paskening regarding one part of it, which is, in our case, whether there's nemanos or not, once you're neman, now you're going to get malchus on. Even though normally you don't get malchus based on 1/8.
What's the scenario where I saw that one of you became a Nazir? I don't know which one. You can ask them, which one of you said?
They don't remember. We don't remember. You can tell me what I said yesterday. I'll tell you I don't remember. And I'll be telling you the truth. And just give me another couple of years. Then, people forget. No, people remember that which is important.
Are you saying they both have to be based on the suffix?
Let me say in the verse. If each one says, I did not do it, they'll have full nemanos, even against 2/8. There's a unique din when it comes to Nazirus or any vow, since you have the right, like amigo, you could have done Sha'ela, even though you didn't say I was Sha'ela in it. It's as if you have nemanos.
But they're both saying, I don't remember.
Then we believe that then the 1/8,
For both of them.
then they'll both be suffix. That's not the case where you get malchus. It's one person, eight shuki, 8 tells me, I yesterday said I'm a Nazir. Gedenk nicht. I don't. Yeah, but that's not in the case of the malchus. That's not that you're mixing one case with the other. Because since it's coming shuki from one, this is two people that have a doubt. The last stanza is where it's one-on-one. Just another case of malchus. The point is, even though that I don't remember, and there's only 1/8, it's going to lead me to malchus when it's vadai, because it's only me. Halacha yudches. Meis, if there was a corpse lying to the width of the road, if the only way going is over him or touching him, if you're trying to go around, and that's called Tumah Yadua, a Nazir went on that road, we say the Nazir is tahir. How can you say it's a suffix, guys? That's very important. Someone who knows that they may not become tummy with corpse tuma, we're speaking about a mace that's lying on the road, they will make an effort not to go over it, to go around it, even though it's very difficult. We don't say for sure that they did it, but there's such a possibility, and based on the rule, suffix, they'll be tired. That's only if they were walking. The final halacha, but if he was either going on an animal or even if he was walking, but he was carrying something. When you're carrying a burden, it's harder to maneuver that way around. Again, the mace was taking up the whole width. Because when you walk without carrying a burden, then right? Look at the Brazilian soccer players. Again, I don't know, they're walking like on the air. But the moment you're schlepping something or you're riding on something, in the case where the mace was on the width, and then vadai, you move the mace and you become tummy. Chavra Perek Yud is a very exciting chapter. You really have to be up and awake and concentrating for this. The Nakuda is simple, but to really chop every detail, if someone here has an Rambam La'am, so whenever needed, you can just keep your eyes over there. And I hope I won't make any major mistake. Let me tell you the issue. The issue is like this. Number one, that if a Nazir becomes a Metzoira, we learned Shabbos, we don't say we don't say that the Nazir's Asay and Loisasay are standing. That's important. if a nazir becomes a mitzaira, when they go through the purification process of a mitzaira, they shave their head even though they're a nazir. But if you know you are a mitzaira, when you have a suffix mitzaira, which can happen, that means a person has this sign of affliction, and the kohen doesn't know. The kohen says you might be a mitzaira or might be not. A suffix mitzaira is not doiche the taglachas of a nazir. Cannot shave. So what happens? Think about it. Let's say a guy says, I'm a nazir for a year. And during that year, he becomes a suffix mitzaira. If you would be a mitzaira, what are the rules? Let's chazim, we learn to Shabbos. Number one, first of all, the sign of tzaras has to leave. Sometimes we use the words kishe yisrape. Sometimes we use the words kishe yitoher. It doesn't mean tahara. It means the sign went away. Number one is there are two birds that are offered. We will never speak about these two birds in this context because they're not brought in the Beis HaMikdash. So they're not like other korbanos. But he brings two birds and he shaves his hair, his beard, his eyebrows. We call this the shaving. Count 7 days. Then he does a second shaving. And he brings various korbanos, as we'll speak out in a moment. So here we go. There's two double shavings. Can't shave. If a nazir, guys, is a nazir for a year, he's only a suffix mitzaira. When will be the first time that he can make a shaving? First time, only at the end of the year, which is fine. But don't forget, guys, a mitzaira has to shave twice. So let me add something even more complicated. When a nazir is tamei, right, on the 7th day, we learned what happens. You have the shaving. Then on the 8th day, you bring the karbanis and you begin recounting. If you have a suffix tuma, then again, you cannot shave, even though you are in the 7th day of your purification, because maybe you're not tamei. So what we're going to have is that the most complex case will be to have a vadai nazir. Let's say he made a nazirus vow for 1 year, and there's a suffix whether he's a mitzaira, and there's also a suffix whether he's tamei. Both of these doubts. Now there has to be a sum total, at least lechatchila. I know tiglachas is not ma'akev. And we're going to have a repeat in this chapter that whenever we're speaking about a man who's not allowed to cut the payas, just the older people that for some reason they like shaving their heads bald, they're not allowed to do that if they're cutting off the payas. So taglachas is not ma'akev. We're going to put the shaving on the side. But if we're not speaking about an adult man, we're speaking about, let's say, a woman. You have to do 2 sets of taglachas. When will you finish the last set of the taglachas? 4 years afterwards. Because each time you have to be chayish, maybe I'm a nazir, and I cannot shave my hair while I'm a nazir because that's one of the 3 prohibitions of a nazir. That's going to be, in short, the final chapter. Perek Yud has 14 halachas, and let's begin with halacha Aleph. Ein adam migaleach teglachas achas. One shaving will never be counted both for the shaving of a nazir, whether it's for the tumah, whether it's for the purification of the nazir, and for tzaras. You can't kill 2 birds with 1 stone over here. So that's the number premise, because if you can do that, that would resolve a lot of the complications. Truth be told, the complications isn't only regarding the shaving, Shuki, the complications is about the karbanis. And we learned in the previous chapter, we had a couple of cases of doubt where the solution for the karbanis were very simple. Here, things will be a lot more complex. So really, we're going to deal with the shaving and with the karbanis and with the isurim. And when can you eat kachim? We're going to speak about all of the issues that come with doubt. Now, the taglachas atzoras, bismanchu safek mitzoira, eno doiches anazirus. It's another important one. In other words, if you are vadai mitzoira, I made a vow for a year. If I become a mitzoira, the moment I'm obligated to undergo the purification process of a mitzoira, I do it during the year. I am shaving. I'm allowed to do that. But not a doubt. And therefore, now, lefikoch, a guy makes it out, I'm a nazir for 1 year. Doubt number 1 is maybe he's a mitzoira, maybe he's not. It means he went to the kohen looked, the kohen says, I don't know how to evaluate that shade of white. He has to practice the laws of mitzoira, l'chumra, but he can't do neither of the shavings because he's a nazir. Because suffix is not there. And on top of that, It's like Mashla Mazel case. This guy has a doubt whether he's tummy, as we learned in the previous chapter. And the Rambam adds, without getting into a lot of details, it's already complicated as it is, that the person's suffix came when there's at least 7 more days in the end of the year. Not 6 more days, that's the way, but there's at least 7 days. Or, of course, if it became a suffix in the beginning of the year. In these cases, so like this. First of all, you have a doubt whether you're tumah. What's the first thing you have to resolve? I want to get out of my tumah. Now, if a nazir that's tamei, I count 7 days. I'm speaking about you got suffix, you had the 7 days. And during the 7 days, you have to get the sprinkling of the ashes of the third on the 3rd and on the 7th. The Rambam doesn't write it. You go to the mikvah on the 7th. So like this, if I'm tamei, I'm out. I'm out of my tumah, which is good. Problem is that a nazir that's tamei shaves on the next day. You can't shave. Why can you not shave? Because if you're not tamei, there's no hanazir. Now again, if you came to the end of the year, you're good. But if I became tamei 2 weeks before the end of the year, I have to wait until the end of the year just for my doubt. And by the way, a general rule: if I make a vow of nazirus for 30 days, if I don't bring the karbanos and the taglachas, even though the shaving is not ma'akeh, but when you say the word taglachas, here we mean the karbanos, I'm bound by a nazir. So since I cannot undergo the procedure, all of the prohibitions, he's not only being metamal mace. How many years will he have to wait? 4 years. He made a vow for 1 year. When will he be out? After 4 years. And now we're going to go through. We said there are 4 shavings. What are the 4 shavings, guys? A mitzvah shaves on the day that he's tahar from his signs. On the 7th day, a nazir that's tamei has to shave after he shaves before he brings the karbanos. Just to remember, a nazir that's tamei shaves and then brings the karbanos. A nazir that's tahir brings the karbanos and then he shaves. But there's 4 obligations to shave, but since they are besafek, neither of them can be done until the end of the year. And we'll see this year is not only at the end of the first year. Every time you come to a year, there can be one scenario where you're going to be chayav aser to shave. You're going to have to wait a year and a year and a year and a year. And since you cannot do the certain final shaving for a nazir toid until the end of the 4th year, so the isurim of nazirus will be on you for 4 years. In order to finish your nazirus petara, right, which is taglachas tara, taglachas tuma misafik, and as we mentioned, ushtei tag lochos shemegalech hametzoira. On the first day of his Tara and on the 7th day of his Tara, Sharehu Safek Mitzayram, Halacha Gebeis, Teglachas Rishoina. So what happens? So which one you do first? What do you do first? The first shaving is performed after the first year. Why after the first year? Like we mentioned, maybe, guys, maybe you're not tummy. The ikid is, maybe you're not a Mitzayra. If you're not this and not that, then what are you? You are a Nazir. A Nazir is a Nazir for a year. So you cannot shave until the end of the year. But when you shave at the end of the year, what is that shaving going to be counted for? So what did we learn over Shabbos? That a nazir that is vaday mitzvah, what do you have to deal with first? With the tzodas. So at the end of the first year, what are you doing? You're doing the first of the 2 shavings of a mitzvah. Megalech ba'roishay, uzekanai, vigabay seinov. I don't know, guys, very important, just to repeat. A man may never shave his payas. A man may never shave his beard. The only reason you can do it is because the eser of the mitzvah is doicha the lav. Whenever there's a suffix, you may not do it. So what the Rambam is writing here is not on an adult man. The Rambam is going to write that explicitly in halacha tes. When we're speaking about shaving, that means if a woman is a mitzvah, if she has facial hair, she has to shave them. Or sometimes you can have a boy that's not yet 13 that already has a beard. That's what we're talking about. Since he's not bar mitzvah, okay. So he shaves. This is the shaving of a mitzvah. They shave not only the hair of the head, which is what a nazir does. They shave the hair, they shave the beard, they shave the eyebrows. And this is what you do on the first day, the first shaving. Again, the Rambam doesn't mention the 2 birds because we don't want to confuse the birds with all the other karbanis. They're in a different geder. They're not brought to the temple. Now, how are we interpreting it? This is what we're saying. And not a mitzvah, not this and not that. How do we view the shaving? What is it for? which is really great. Okay?
That's why he can drink wine.
Well, they can't drink wine because of something. Forget about the wine. Just to shave. This will be the taglacha. And again, guys, I know that a nazir is not allowed to shave the beard because there's no obligation. So we're speaking about someone who has no issue with the beard. This is for an isha or for a cut. You have to go through all. The Rambam is going to go through all of the different sides. If he was a mitzvah vadai, bishana rishoina, right? So harei taglachas hashem shal. Now, normally, do you wait until the end of the year? No, guys. If you are a vadai mitzvah, you know what you do. All you need to do is to wait until the signs depart. But here you have a doubt. Now, what do you normally do by a mitzvah? You wait 7 more days. You can, and then you do a shaving again. You can't wait 7 days. Why can you not wait 7 days? I'll give you one scenario. Because maybe you were not a mitzvah, but you know what you were? Maybe you were tamei. And if you were tamei, after you do the first shaving, what happens then? Now you recount all of the days of your nazirus. So you have to wait in between the 2 shavings, not 7 days. How many days? A year. And then you do a second taglacha shel mitzvah. Why do we call it shel mitzvah? Because maybe you were a mitzvah. If you are a mitzvah, you need 2 shavings. When a nazir is a mitzvah, what's the first thing you deal with, my friends? Mitzvah. Like we said, this is mamash amazing. And therefore, so you got to wait a year between the 2 shavings. Now, what was the worst case scenario? You are a mitzvah. There's one upside. After waiting the whole 2 years, since for sure you removed the issue of a tzoras, you are allowed to eat kachim. What the Rambam did not yet address, which will be addressed in this chapter, is what about the karbanis? It gets very fun. We'll leave that soon. He's just speaking about the shavings now. And the karbanis. And the karbanis that will speak soon. And now you can eat kachim, because you are no longer mechusar kippurim, because you will be allowed to bring the karbanis, as we'll explain. But now let's go further. Maybe, guys, like we said, maybe you were a mitzvah. So these 2 shavings only dealt with what? They only dealt with the mitzvah. You have to wait a 3rd year. Now, why do you have to wait a whole year? No, guys, when a mitzvah, when a nazir is tamei, you do the 7 days and you shave. I'll tell you why. Because maybe this guy is not tamei. He was a mitzvah. So these 2 shavings was for the tzaras. Now he has to count a year of nazirus. He can't do the teklachas of tumas. So he has to wait a full year. Maybe this guy is not a tamei mace. And therefore, like we mentioned, another rule that we learned on Shabbos, that when you become a mitzvah, the days of confirmed tzoras and the days which are normally 7, here it's a year, don't count down the nazirus. But if you were a mitzvah and not tamei, then you still owe the whole 100 days. That's why that Rambam wrote in the beginning of this chapter that this guy became a suffix in the beginning of the year, just to explain that. The tumah could have came at the end.
What happened in the middle, then you would have.
Then we have to know that then we learned over Shabbos. You have to put all these things together. Okay. And we said that the you got to wait a whole year, and you make a shaving at the end of the 3rd year, and maybe that shaving is taglachas tara, right? And if that would be the case, then you would be good after the end of the 3rd year. But that's not for sure the case, because maybe you were tamei mace, and maybe you were a mitzvah. And if that's the case, and what did we begin this chapter with? Ve'ein taglachas achas oila for both nazirus and tzoras, which comes out taglachas rishayna and taglachas sheniya was only for the tzoras. This 3rd one that you never waited the whole year was only to resolve the tumah. Because when a nazir is tamei, he loses all the dinim. Only after he purifies does he recount from the beginning, from day number 1. And the fikach gevaldig. Another detail, the hair from every single shaving, since it might be the hair of a nazir, which has a tara, if we would know otherwise, it loses its kedusha. But since it's aser b'hana, shesar nazir shenet stara muter b'hana. If you would know that he's a nazir, that's a mitzvah, that hair has no holiness. But every time, maybe it's from a Nazir Betara. So therefore, you have to be machman on all sides. Now, for the next halacha is easy. We gave an example of 1 year. And if the guy makes a vow to be a Nazir for 10 years, so this guy for the next 40 years can drink wine. Guys, don't forget, you can be shoyal beneder. We're not saying that. But if you don't do that, there's no mercy. That's the law. And he's a Suffolk Mitzvah. And even if the Suffolk Tumah was only at the end, again, the emphasis is that if the Suffolk of Tzoras came at the end, you already had some days. Here we're speaking about a case where you might not have any day counted. You got to count them all over again. Until 40 years. And you have to have 4 haircuts, 4 shavings, 1 at the end of every 10 years. The first one, like we mentioned, l'safik imei tzarata. Shniya l'safik imei safrei shal mitzayda. The third, l'safik tumasay. And the fourth, l'glachas tohada. Atkan, shaving. Why do we have to explain now karbanos? Now, to clarify, let me say the following. That we're not counting the karbanos of the menazir on the first day. It's 2 birds. Bilita. It's not kosher. On the 7th day, which is on the second shaving of the nazir, let me tell you what happens. He shaves on the 7th day, and normally on the following day, guys, he brings like this. If he's wealthy, he brings a asham and a chatos and an oila, animals. If he's poor, the asham has to be an animal. But then he gets to bring 2 doves, echad lachatos ve'echad la'oila. And the beauty here will be, we have a guy that's a Safek Mitzayra. The Ashim is not Ma'akev. Chatas is Ma'akev. You cannot bring a Chatas animal Misafek, but since a Mitzayra who is poor can bring a bird Chatas, one of the steps that will have to happen, which will be a great solution, is you make him poor. He has to write his money away to someone else. So now he's allowed to bring a bird Chatas, and a bird Chatas can come on Allah. So that's, remember that the karbanos that a mitzayda brings on the day after the count of 7, kevesh la'asham, chatos oila, either animals, wealthy or birds. Now let's go to the dinim of naziros. Halka. A nazir tamei. What did we learn over Shabbos? A nazir tamei brings always, even if he's wealthy, 2 birds, which is great, 1 chatos and 1 oila, and then he brings an animal la'asham, which is not ma'akev. You can't bring it al asafi. A nazir that's tahir never brings a bird, even if he's poor. A nazir that's tahir brings 3 animals. Chatos, asham, chatos, oila, and shlamim. Okay, now if we can hold that in our brains, Ketzad, halacha dal ketzi, how do you bring your karbanos? So if the guy is wealthy, so that's when he got stripped up. Because the karbanos that the mitzayda brings after the 7 days, he has to bring. If he's wealthy, he has to bring an animal chatas. You can't bring it. You have a doubt here. So he writes all of his property to someone else. Giving it to your wife doesn't count halachically. Give it to the kids. My son is smiling. Get all my debts over here. You write all your nechasim. So now halachically you're poor. If he brings a carbon on it, he's not yoitz. You can't say bring a carbon of an usher, like we mentioned, because he brings a animal chatos. You can't do that. You have a doubt. So now he gets to bring a bird. Then he brings the chatos or oil. Now look at this detail. What does he bring? What does he bring for the oil? He doesn't bring a bird. He brings a oilas behema. And he brings a oilas behema, the first, the second, and the third. Rambam will explain why. It's all based on one simple rule. The most important carbon in everything that we mentioned is the chatos. And don't forget, there's a doubt. Don't forget that if this guy was not a mitzvah, if this guy was not tamei, what karbanis does he have to bring? The end of Nazirus Tara has to be animals. 3, and 1 is an animal oil. So there's no downside by him bringing an animal oil. Because if he was a mitzayra, at least he did the minimum. What's the minimum? Chatos oif. If the guy is not this, not that. No, by the way, if he's a nazir that's tamei, even if he's wealthy, he also brings a bird. I know that. But maybe he was a nazir toy. Because you are always trying to cover all the bases in the best way possible. That's where it gets beautiful. And the Rambam is going to spell out why you always bring an animal oil. Now, another detail, even though that, thank God, we can bring a chatas bird offering, even when there's a doubt, you can offer it, but the kahanim cannot eat it. Say that, but at least you get to bring it. Now, by the fourth shaving, you bring carbon nazir tamid. You will bring all of the three animals, but you're going to have to specify, because guys, if you already covered the oilas behema, even though you're not bringing it at the same time, it's also good. You say that if I was already yoitze, then this is an adava. The only one that you really own now is the chatas and the shlamim also. You bring a shlamim, but you say if I don't have to, if it was covered already, okay. We're gonna go out all the steps. Halacha 5. Sholosh chatas so'oif. Shloish chatas so'oif. Every time they have three shavings, you're gonna bring each time a bird chatas, guys, and an animal oila. Why? What are you saying? Chatas rishoina l'safik tumasai. What's the beauty? If you're tamei, what did we say? A nazir that's tamei always brings chatas oif. Let's say you were not a mitzvah. Let's say you were only tamei. Shniya l'safik tzaratai. A wealthy, and this guy was impoverished. We make him poor. She'ein hamitzayra maybe karbanoi elo la'achar tiglach hashniya. The Rambam is answering a question. Hold on, guys. When you have an issue of tzaras and tuma, normally you have to deal with the tzaras first. But here you can't. Why can't you? Because when does the mitzayra bring his karbanis? After the second shaving. The first shaving was only predicated on either he was a nazir tar or he was tamei, and you're covering the tamei issue. The first shaving will never be machayiv you to bring the chatas of a mitzayra, but that goes in the second. Why do you bring a chatas in the third? I'll tell you why. Because if you were a mitzayra, then the third year was for the tuma. With the beauty nazar, that's tamei. The karbanis is 2 birds, and the keva is la'asham, gavaldik. And therefore, since maybe it was a mitzayra vadai and a tamei vadai, we already explained the third shaving now was only for the tuma. Perfect. So that explains why in the first 3 taglachasin you bring the oif chatas. Now let's go to the oila. Why every time you bring the oila, the animal oila, and don't forget, guys, could be you're not chayiv to bring the animal oila. Could be you're chayiv to bring a bird oila, but it's not ma'akev. So we have to cover all the bases. That's the best solution. Sholish olis behemosh maybe imam is al harishoina. He has to stipulate and say like this: if I'm tahar, that's the reason. Because if you are tahar, what do you have to bring at the end? Wealthy or poor? This guy became poor. It doesn't matter. A nazir that's tahar brings. We said a chatas animal, an oila animal, and a shlamim animal. So you say if I'm not a mitzvah, if I'm not tamei, if I'm tamei. A tamei guy never brings an animal. So he says, anadava, no downside. And he says the same bashniya bashlishis, because every single time it could be that these are the karbanos for the end of his nazirus. Like we already explained. If the guy is not a mitzvah, but he was tamei, then the second shaving is for the end of the nazirus. If the guy is a mitzvah but not tamei, then the third is for the end of the nazirus. Every time there's such a possibility. Beautiful. Halacha 7. Well, maybe carbon tahara b'taglachas revius. Now, when he brings it at the end of the 4th, he makes the following stipulation: if I was tamei, then what? If he was tamei, then what? A nazir tamei never brings an oilas behema. Then oilah reshoina was in a double. Now that's to resolve my tahara. So this one is from my chayva. Okay. If muchlat hayisi, which meant oila rishoina was chayvas mitzayra. Why was the first oila chayvas mitzayra? A mitzayra that's an ani only brings a bird. Brings an animal. No. We're never going to bring the asham because it's not ma'akev, and you can't bring it on a doubt. But he is saying, if I was muchlat, then then Oila Rishayna means the Oilas that were brought prior to this one already resolved the Chayvas Mitzayra. This has to be explained. This has to be explained. I'm missing a step over here because this guy became poor, and a poor mitzayda never brings an animal oila. And this fourth oila is chayvas nazirus. Why is the first one for the mitzayda? Doesn't mean that there's something has to be added over here. I'll tell you what it meant. It meant is. Why did he bring an animal oila the first time? Just to make it clear, you bring an animal oila because maybe you were not a mitzayda. That's what it meant. And that's what it means. Maybe you were not tamei. So the first shaving was already machayiv you to bring the oilas behema for the nazirus. And we said it doesn't have to come together. You can use that for now. That's what oila shen chayvus mitzayda. V'zu chayvus nazirus. No, I'm missing a step. There has to be, if you have a Rambam, there's something over here in Zion, why at the fourth you're saying that a prior oila resolved mitzayda. Don't forget, we're speaking about a person that became poor. Let me take a quick look over here. Allah Zion. Even though the Rambam wrote that he only brings I got it. Okay, great. So he writes like this. He writes another detail that even though the mitzvah only brings the karbonis after the second shaving, we don't care if he brings the oil first. When did we tell this person to give away his property to someone else? By the second taglachas. By the first taglachas, gavalik. By the first taglachas, he's still wealthy. And we allow for a mitzayda that's wealthy to bring, if he brought his oila after the first shaving, it counts for the oila that he's chayiv after the second shaving. Why would we do that? Because we want to, because the guy's not poor. This is a legal. Why would we tap into the legal loophole if we don't need to yet? Yeah. No. Because by the second one, he already became poor. He was not chayiv to bring an animal oil. Like this, we're covering as much as we could. Now, the middle ones are in a double. If he was never a tumas meis, but guys, he was a mitzayda. So then we say, like we just explained, was a chayva. The second one, achas l'chayvas mitzayda, va'achas l'chayvas nezirus. And then it's going to come out that the third and the fourth are in a double. Beautiful. Now, Hashar Karban Tarasi, we're speaking about the Kafsa Lachatos, the Ayal Lashnomis. He brings the three animals. The Imtame Mesa Yisi and the Mitzayda, which is the worst case scenario, then Oyla Rishayna Chayvas Tzadas. I think good for that Rambam, because he chaptaran, he brought at least one animal, even only was after the first Teglachas. The second and the third, like we explained, is a Nadava. And now was a Karban Taharam. Halacha Ches. Now Abel ha'asham v'ha'olam eino ma'akven loy b'teglachas tuma v'loy b'tzoras, which is great, which is why it doesn't checkmate us, because guys, if you would be chayiv to bring an asham and it would hold back going further, you cannot bring an asham misafik. The whole beauty here is that a mitzvah that's now brings a bird chatas. The beauty is that a nazir tamei only brings birds. Even though he's also chayiv to bring an animal asham, he won't bring it. That's how we found a way out. So nim say so aimer imu mitzayda vadai v'loy mitmelameis hadei tar b'tziparin. That's now that Rambam mentions it for the first and final time. And the chatos oiv is his chatos. V'loy say yachel because it's a suffix. The oilos behema she'ima the comment telachas tahara kedei shegalech ala behema. And if he's a tmei meis, hadei oilos behema the dava gavaldik v'im eina mitzayda utmei meisu. So then we say chatos oiv karban nazir shenitma, because that's beautiful. Because a nazir tamei only brings birds, and v'oilas behema will be an adava, like we explained. Because the animal you only bring when you finish the nazirus b'tara. But what you need it, you're going to bring it after the fourth teglachas. And if he was not a Tamei Mason, not a Mitzvah, he was nothing, which means really he should have ended everything at the end of the first year. You brought an animal, perfect. That is Michoybas Taglachas Tahara. Whatever the Chatas Soif, Baal Asafik, and it's not Nechelas. And the greatest beauty is that you don't have to bring the three karbanis at the same time. The emes, only the Chatas will be enough. So I don't care that it turned out, if you were not a Mitzvah and you were not Tamei, what did it turn out? That the animal that you brought at the end of the first year, that was L'choivas, a Nazir B'tara. All the other oilers are a donation carbon. Even the one you bring at the end of the fourth year is a donation oiler. Why do you have to bring the Chatas and the Shlamim? Gesundheit works. All of the above, now that Rambam is going to spell out what we spoke out before, when we're speaking about shaving 4 times, it cannot be on a man who's chayiv in the mitzvahs, who may not shave the payas ever, only in the exception where it's a taglachas shel mitzvah. May not shave the beard ever, only taglachas mitzvah. The Sfardim are in the shtibel, not in the back. Only for speaking about a minor, and we speak about the beard because a minor can have a beard, but he's not chayiv in mitzvahs. Or a woman who is not bound by the negative commandments of payas and the beard. Because maybe they're tired. And if they are tired, so what do you do? You only do one shaving. When? At the end of 4 years. You didn't do shavings before. I don't care. Nazir shouldn't start a vadai. Now we'll go. Now it gets a lot easier. Now we're going to go scenario. You're a vadai mitzvah, which is great, and the tumas besafik. So let's go. What do you do? First of all, if I made a pledge to be a nazir, I don't care for 1,000 years, for 10 years, for 1 year. If I'm vadai mitzvah, we learned over Shabbos. The moment the signs of tzaras depart from me, and now I have the 2 obligations: shaving b'yoim, that the signs went away. And on the 7th day, that's doichen the zirus. Yeah.
The whole reason why he has to wait another year in between each one is because
of the suffix. Because of the shaving is
the shaving is what makes it have to click in for another
so
year.
Then he's asking, very good. If in that case, very good. Now you get a very clear understanding of what not ma'akiv means. Not ma'akiv doesn't mean let's give this guy a break and let him drink wine before. No. Not ma'akiv means if there's no option, ein bereira, post facto, that's called b'di'evet. You don't say b'di'evet lechatchila. Why do I have to kasher my kalim? If it's not b'nei yoimon, if I would cook in the pot, it's going to be kosher anyway. You don't do that. Kasher it. Why do I have to do that? Same thing, Danny. Not ma'akiv does not mean lechatchila. You're trying to make a b'di'evet into a lechatchila. That's the answer.
But I was saying, in all these scenarios that we just discussed, if it was a man,
then there's no option. Then that's called b'di'evet. You ein bereira.
Don't do the shaving.
Yes.
You still have to do this 1 year?
Sure.
Why can't you shorten it up?
Because if you don't bring the karbanos, you can't move on.
Why can't it?
One second. I take it back. If you don't do the taglachas, then you move it up. Sure, you move it up.
So you wouldn't have to wait.
No, you wouldn't have to wait 4 years because very good. Very good. It's good to be a man. So what do you do? Yitar means refuah. Yitar doesn't mean, it means that now that the signs went away. So mazeh bashlishi bashvi, which is always done. 1 second. Why do you have to have mazeh bashlishi bashvi? I'll tell you why. Because if you are a tummy mace, how do you think you're going to bring the karbanis of tzaras, Danny? You can't bring the karbanis, you're a tummy mace. Oh, so you have to go through the purification for tummy mace. And umegaleach tiglachas tuma. Don't forget. That's the din of a Masada. But 1 second, you only have a suffix tummy. So Danny, you may not do the shaving right away. Megalech teglachas tuma means after the whole year ended. Don't forget, because here you have the doubt. Oh, and now maschalim nesnezirus kula. Sharei nafli yom adashenim besafik tuma shenitma. Or maybe a carbonis of tana b'sheisa b'yayin. Which is on the 8th day of the Tzoras. Now you can eat kachim. Halacha Yud Aleph. Let's go on the Punkt Faket. The Tumas Vadai, and you have a Mitzvah that's a suffix. Again, you don't know how to determine the halachic definition of that shade of white. And now again, once Vitar means that you got healed from the suffix Tzoras, then you have to wait the whole year. Why do you have to wait the whole year? You know why? I'll tell you why. Because maybe you're not you have to wait the whole year. She'ein tiglachas safek nigoy doichen nezirus. That's why. And b'achar kach. Because very good. In other words, you can't count the 7 days for Tumas Meis and shave for the Tumah because maybe you are a Mitzvah. And a Mitzvah can only, that's the word, the Mitzvah can only bring the Chabanas after they're taught. That's where you got trapped. Between the Taglachas Mitzvah and the here it's great. Here you don't have to wait the whole year. Because you are a Vadai Mitzvah. When you are a Vadai, if you had the sprinklings in between both Taglachas.
Those sprinklings are for the Safek Tumah?
Yes. Yes. For Tumas Meis. Once you become tar from your tzaras, then now you can bring the korbanos for the Tumas Meis. No, you can't bring korbanos if you can't eat them. You got to take care of Tumas tzaras first. And then you count the entire Nazirus. Okay, halacha yud beis. That's the easiest. If you're for sure both, you know what the beauty is? You don't have to wait a year. That's the whole point. In other words, the asay of the mitzvah to shave is doicha the lav of a nazir of not shaving. And like we explained over Shabbos, there's no more asay and loisa said by the nazir once he became a mitzvah. When? Not a year. Once the signs of tzaras left, and you do the sprinkling of Shlish Shvi, Danny, always the sprinkling is connected to Tumas Meis. Why do you have to take care of Tumas Meis? Because how can you bring the karbanis of a mitzvah? You get it if you are still Tummy Meis. And then at the end, like every time, this is for a man because you have like obligation, and which is the glachashni of the tzaras. You can eat kachim. Now you count the 7 days litumasai. So Danny, 1 second. Because the days that you were counting for the tzaras, we have to add that detail. Danny, even though you did hazah on the 3rd and the 7th, but there's another detail. You have to have shivas yemei. And the days that you were counting for your tzaras, those same days, you don't kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They're not oila lemei tumasi. That's it. Now we got all the links. So you have to have another week. And then and now good, now you're good to go. Maybe carbon beautiful. Now the question is, why do you have to count 7 days? Oh, that I'm befedish. Didn't you already have the hazah to get rid of Tumas Meis? If not, you can't bring the second set of the karbanis of the mitzvah. Allah say for Shiva she'ein Shivas yimei hatuma oilen b'shivas yimei asfira shuvein teglach l'shal mitzvah. Final halacha yudalid ha'emer hadeni nazir imesakach bekach or im lo yaseh. Guys, we're concluding the whole din of Nazirus. Just like the Rambam at the end of the Nadarim gave some hashkafa. He's speaking about what Nazirus is kosher and what's not kosher. That's called a Rasha. In other words, what did we say at the end of Nadarim? Nadarim are good if you're doing it, l'choinem de Yosef, l'saken ma'isov. This is not l'choinem de Yosef, l'saken ma'isov. Stam, if this will happen, I'll become a Nazir. Or not. And that's what when we speak about Nidrei Rishoyim. Avol Hanoid Lashem that a Kedusha. One answer, one example is we have in the Gemara. A person looked, they were drinking water and they saw their reflection and they saw how beautiful they are and they felt arrogant. And the guy knew, I'm not going to shave my hair ever. That's my whole beauty. So to trap his animal, he says, Hareini Nazir. Lashem. To humble himself. That's no Meshubach. And Baharei Nemar Boy Nezer Alikov Al Roishai. Wow. The hair noch becomes like a nezer, like a crown. Kadishul Hashem. And the Torah equates this person like a prophet. Both Lenevim, umi bachurechem lenazirim. In other words, just like by Nadarim, min akotza el akotza, the kavana of why you're becoming a nazir will determine whether you are in the category of the wicked or whether you are mamish like a navi. That was an amazing chapter. As complicated as the 10th chapter is, equally as easy as the next chapter will be. I know it's late, but we're going to finish it. Now, Bahar, very simple. Arachim v'charamim. We're going to speak about charamim later. Arachim means at the end of Parshas B'chukoisai, B'chlal, people donate money to the temple, to the Bedek Habayis, and if they use the words value, damim, normal, then, how do you evaluate the value of a person? So you have slave markets, you had slave markets, and that determines, because you can argue a person has infinite value. Yes, he does. Yes, she does. But that's the way you define the value. How much is this person worth in a slave market? The Torah makes exedas hakosov, that if the word that you use is erech, which means evaluation, but that word, whether I say erki olai or erkecha olai, so according to age and gender, no matter how much you are worth in the slave market, you are given by the Torah a value. And that's the money that you have to give to the Bedek Habayis. That's basically the whole first chapter. 5 positive commandments and 2 negative commandments. Number 1, Lodun be'erchei adam. It's mamish mefaydish in the Torah. And that's called erchei adam. Din erchei behema, as we'll see. If I use the words erech for a behema, there is no age and gender, then we will say that the word erech and the word damim will mean the same thing. Din erchei batim, din erchei sados. Now we're going to have the laws of someone who uses the words chedem. I know the words chedem can also be used if God forbid someone is put in a ban, but the word chedem means a devotion. And we're going to see sometimes the intent is Bedek Habayis. Sometimes people use the words chedem when they are gifting something to a kohen. We're going to get into that later, right? Stam chedem lekehanim, stam chedem lebedek habayis. The 6 is not to sell something that was designated as a chedem, as a devotion offering. And number 7, shelo yigoel chedem, it may not be redeemed. Guys, we're going to go through all of the details. Ubir mitzvos elu b'prakam elu, Perek Aleph. I know it's 23 halachas. Let's set up a world record over here. Halach Aleph is very simple because these are mamish psukim in the Torah. But the most important, you have to get the first chapter. Ha'arachim. In other words, a commitment using the words erech, or in plural arachim. Hein neder. Listen, just like the Rambam began the Darim and the Ziris, that they are included in the category of Nidrei Isur. As the Rambam began in Hilchos Nedarim, we spoke about the 2 categories of Nedarim. It's very simple. We include arachim in the category of Nidrei Hegdish because you're giving it to God Almighty. That has a lot of consequence. How much would we hold ourselves back of being mated that neder, for example? Much more. It's Nidrei Hegdish. Could be done, but you only do it b'doicha gadol, as the Rambam wrote at the end, I think, of Nedarim. Shenemer, as it says, why are you even putting this in the category of a vow? Because it says so in the Torah. Ish ki yafli neder. Hers be'erkecha nefashis l'Hashem. And therefore, but since it's included in Nedarim, so if a person, God forbid, violated that, they're going to be chayiv lo-yachol devarei. Another v'lo sa'acher. Now, when are you chayiv bal sa'acher? No, 5-way machlokes tanoim. After 3 yomim tovim come and you don't give it to God, like it is by karbanis, and because it's a neder, umishum kachol hayotzim epiv yaseh halacha beis. Mitzvahs are saying, lodem medinei arachin kasher mefoirish b'Torah, which means that whether you say the words erki olai, I pledge my erech, or if you say erech ze olai, ze is a person. Obviously, it has to be to a person. Oy erech ploini olai, loiseno erech lefi. The 2 things: the years, and as we'll see, it's not just the years; it's age and gender, and there are only 2 genders. Halacha gimel, the kamu ha'erech. Ben shloishim yamim pachos ein lo yerech chayv 0. And a person who says erech ze olai, oh, but 1 second, not chayv 0. Since he's not included in the parsha of erech gavaldik, so then it's like he's saying erech keli ze olai. 1 second, it's not gonna chayv nothing. If I say erech keli ze olai in a human being, what my statement was nonsensical, not a shkaiti. Ein chayv klum. Ho yemi ben echad shloishim yem. he entered his 31st day. He entered his 31st day. And then ad ben chameshan gemurais va'ad bechlal. That's the key. The day prior to your birthday. Erech hazacher. The Torah says 5 shkolim. The erech of a female is 3 shkolim. Once they entered the 6th year, until they finish 20 years, means the last day. Understand? Prior to the 21st birthday, then we say the erech of hazacher is 20 shkolim. Then a keva is 10 shkolim. It's simple. The Torah writes all these numbers. If Kevin is here, you put up a chart, that would be great. Until you finish 60 years, the 50, that's when you have the greatest erech, and then a cave of 30. And I know that Rashi Chumash, the proportion of the difference of prices changed. The man will have more value than a woman, but she now, relative to how she was before, that was the famous Rashi, that an old man in the house is a grumpy person in the house. And above in the house is Gan Eden in the house. I feel a chay kama shonim. Erech hazacher 15 shkolim, and then a keva will be 10 shkolim. How is that? Simple. For Mishkal, it's the weight of 230 barley corns in silver. And as we know, the Kvaresifo, all of us, as we learned in Al Cheshkalim, so even though biblically, you should know a shekel is 320, take barley coins, make them out of silver, that's it. The Chachamim added, we allowed the inflation, and now it's 384. Those were the numbers that we learned in Al Cheshkalim. Halacha 5. Tumtum and an androgynous. In other words, even though when it comes to other areas of halacha, it's like a suffix. A tumtum is vadai. We don't know. They're not included. Tumtum and androgynous ein lahem erech. In other words, the Torah's dinim of arachim is only zacher vadai and the cave of adois. And therefore, if a tumtum or a androgynous said erki olai, or if another person pointed to the tumtum and the androgynous either, and they said ein chayiv klum, it's like using the words erech for someone under not 31 days. Or if I point to the cup and I say erech of this cup, we don't say I meant damim, garnished. Halacha vav hagoy nerach. He can be used as the erech of the goy, but he cannot make such a pledge. Why, guys? Remember, David al b'nei Yisrael, ma'arichen. The din of the erech. If a goy says, "I'm pledging money to God," we'll see. You can't use it for the Beis Hamikdash, for Yerushalayim. You take the money, you use it, but not erech. Ketan goy she'amar erki olai. Or if the goy says erech Yisrael zeolai, loy amar klum. Yisrael she'amar erech goy zeolai. Or erech pleni hagoy olai. Even though I pointed to the goy, the age and gender. Noisem l'tishnei hagoy anerach. V'chein hamarich es acheres es ashoitem. Even though in a slave market they have very little value. Chayev and noisem l'tishanav. Halacha zayin evet, guys. That's a evet kanani. Both nerach v'oirech. Because here he has a bona fide din of a Yisrael. Now you can ask a question. Wie hat Geld? Hat nicht kein Geld. And then if he gets emancipated, which normally isn't a violation, right? The Torah says, but you need a minion, they have a heter. So then, body makes no difference whether you're beautiful, whether you're healthy. And you go to Brazil, you stop at a red light traffic, you'll see people that are going to solicit you. They're all over there. It's a tad because sometimes the parents do it to the kids for them to raise it. It's terrible. Oh, halacha time. Now, damim. Question, you say gelt. Gelt is not erech. For example, that the word makes all of the difference. If a person says, dame olai, demei olai, demei pleni olai, even if that guy is 1 day old, or if you'd say it to a tumtum, or to an androgynous, or to a goy, it makes no difference. Then you give whatever that person is worth, a dinar, 1,000, 1,000. How do you evaluate? How much would this person be worth in a slave market? Where do you give the money to? Big question. Hakoil, Staman, Lebedek Habayis. And that would go into the lishka that was in the Mikdash, Muchenes, Lekache, Bedek Habayis. As we'll learn details later, Goy, Yudal, Gosh, Amanadami Alai, or the May 20. So Taka, now it's not Erech, he's Chayiv. But however, not to the Bedek Habayis. The Ein Onay from the Lishko. She'ein mekablim in Agoyim l'Davar Zu Oy Neder l'Chazek Bedek Habayis, nor to the upkeep of the walls of Yerushalayim, to Yerushalayim Shenemar, as it says in Ezra, Loy Lachem B'Lanu Livnas Bayis. The Nemar V'Lachem in Chelek Tzedek Yerushalayim. Danny, who built the second temple? We'll get to that. Okay. The Goyim, the Persians. Oh yeah, okay, but that's not the Bedek Habayis. That was to the building of and not to the upkeep of. Maybe that's the difference. We'll see. Halacha Yud Beis. The Kate said you also behen. So first of all, you ask the guy, Al das minada. If he said the way the Jews want to do with the money, then Beis Din will do whatever they want for the communal needs, of course. Chutz mi Bedek Habayis, Bedek Yerushalayim. And if he says La Shamayim means he meant the temple, but we may not receive it. And you take the money and you bury the money. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hagoy says. Why? Because of the cloud that Roiv Goisesin are Lamisa, and therefore he already has the status of a mace. Shall Yisrael Lahargoi Alaveda Sha'abar and Beherichoi Acher, Osharach Atzmai, Oshamadome Olai, Oshamarach de Meze Olai. Right, he's a dead man walking. And for that, the Torah says in the Chukkai say, Kol Chedem Asher Yocharam Min Ha'adam. Chazal say that verse is referring to someone that ain't like Pidim because he is Kames. Allah 14. Zeha Yoitze Lahari. Sheherach HaChedim. Oy Noda Demeim Oy Hizik. All right. So he's not being used as the source of the Eirech. He's making a commitment. I'm giving someone else's Eirech. Or if he's being dead man walking, he's being led to his death, but he damages someone else. He's chayiv to pay. And we're going to hakol min chassid. Makes no difference. Furthermore, a cotton. We began this chapter by saying that arachim is included in the parsha of Nedarim. I know Nidrei Hegdish, but it's in Nedarim. We learned in Nedarim the concept of mukfa samuch leish. Gavaldik. So cotton shigia lo'enes Nedarim beherech oy nadar danim chayiv l'shalei shaharei Nedarim kayomim. Like we learned in Ilchas Nedarim. Beautiful. Allah Hatazayin. For arachim haksuvim v'yashonim is always about the person that was used as the object of the pledge, and never. It's not the age of the pledger. Ketzad Ben Eslim that says regarding a 60-year-old man, erka chalai, then noisim erech ben shishim, and the reverse, ben shishim she'amen le ben Eslim erka chalai, then noisim erech ben Eslim. V'chein chachayotze bozeh Allah Yitzayim mitzvah chamarach sheyali piv v'libay shavin like Nedarim. Another din. Even though you only do it midoich gadol, but you can do it. You point to many people. Boomba, you got to give everyone's erech. Now, if the guy is an ani, we're going to learn later that an ani may never give less than a seller. Okay, so you're going to make the chesh when you have a whole beis din. And they say, oh, really, you're chayiv to give X amount of money. You're poor, you're going to give one seller. We're going to learn all these guys paid shlishi, God willing, tomorrow. Allah, you test. You said it many times. For every statement, you got to give another erech pledge. Also, if he says, Shnei arachi olai, you got to give 2 arachim. And if you said 1,000, then you got to give 1,000 times the erech that God gave you. Halacha 20, Omar hadei olai erech, and v'loi perish erech mi. Oh, or erech stam. Interesting. We're not machmer, we're mekel. We say it means the minimum possible, which is 3 shkolim. Halacha 21, Hoimer erki olai, umeis kodem shiyamid badin. We'll see that there has to be a din. Even though you know these dinim, they're mefurish in the Torah, there got to be a beis din that establishes how much you owe. Here the rule is, since there was not hamad badin, because the Torah says that the guy who made the erech pledge has to stand lifnei hakoyim beherech hakoyim. That didn't happen yet. But if there was badin and then he passes away, then yitnu hayorshim. Unlike when you say, I'm giving my damim, dear, even though she'amad badin, umeis koidim, but there wasn't a verdict yet. Umeis koidim sheiksu dama v'emer adyanam kame yishva, ein hayorshim chayavam lishem. Why? Because you cannot evaluate his damav after he died. You don't do that ever. But if you katsu damav, and then he dies, you give it to the Yarshim. Danny, what's the difference? Because by Erchen, it's so easy to know the rule. Once he's standing bedin, age or gender. The final halacha of gimel uma bein aracham ledamim, huge. That's the whole part. That's the synopsis of the whole chapter. That if you use the word erech, ketsuvin min ha'Torah, age, gender, and everyone has that amount of value. If you say the word damim, einam ketsuvim, v'cheino emed erech ploini olai, and after you made that statement, both the oirech and the nerach died. Acher she'amad hanerach badin. That's key. Chayav ha'yarshim litein. Meis hanerach koydem she'amad badin. Even though the marach is kayam, doesn't matter. You put it because she ain't erech lames. And the hanerach is the one that has to stand badin. Amar demei olai. But here again, and he stood in the din, but he died before the Beis Din ruled how much is this guy worth in the slave market. Again, the heirs is patir she'ein damim lemesim givaldik chaber to be continued.
So even though the amounts are fixed,
You need a amount of din
stand
in front of it. We'll see.
That's affects what he has to pay. What's a fixed amount?
Even though we know what they're going to say.
What I really can't when you say between wealthy and poor, there's a difference on Eric.
Yeah. After the amount of din, so they say, oh, you got to give 50 shekel.
Yeah.
The guy has a halach of money,
Yeah.
and he gives for every pledge he has to give one seller.
Rambam didn't talk about the.
No, we don't.